All right, Lucky, you've got this really nice portrait that you've gotten here, and I know you've already done a lot of stuff to it. What have you done, roughly?
Well, basically, I made another layer on top of a layer, and I blurred out the background. Made a huge lens blur so it can kind of flush everything, all the harsh colors and all the harsh blacks and the whites. And I cloned out a car.
That's right, there was an entire car back there.
Yeah, there was a car right there. And I lightened up the tones in her face over here, just to kind of even out the color differences. I brightened the highlights in her eyes, and I defined some of the shadows in her facial features.
Fantastic. So as you took the image, it had pretty deep depth of field, and so you were feeling like the background was competing with her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think your decision to blur it was exactly right, and you've done a great job, and your car removal is amazing. It actually looks like there's just a parking space there. That's incredible. So this is great. This is very often how, actually this is always how it works. You sit down and you do just the edits you think you need to get the image working right. And very often, whether you're doing the printing or someone else is doing the printing, there's another set of edits that need to come over it to make it ready for print. So you gave me this image, and I looked at it and made a couple of decisions about some things that I think needed to happen to get it to look good on paper. And I've done this print here, which, because of our paper choice, I now think I want to go back and do a different way. Mm-hmm. Our background here is not as black as it could be because we had to switch paper. I've got a nice dark black over here.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to try and push that up a little more, but also I'm going to see if I can get us back to this other paper that's holding a better black. Mm-hmm. So that aside, there are some other things that I did. What do you see different between the print and here?
I see more highlight tones in her hair, kind of how it stuck out, and more in her shirt I can see more texture than down here where it's just kind of like lines and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a big color difference in texture there.
And the reason I did that is as I was looking at her shirt, there's very little contrast between the light threads and the dark threads, and I was afraid that was just going to have the overall appearance of just a big wall of gray.
Yeah, yeah.
And so in addition to having more texture, popping these tiny little highlights out is how we start to get an image that starts to look more silvery. Mm-hmm. The great silver prints that you sometimes see hanging in galleries and things, what gives them that silvery, rich texture is they've got really nice white highlights, and they've got a huge range of grays spread throughout the tonal range. And here we've got mostly darker grays.
Yeah.
So by brightening up the whites, we're also in that process pulling out some lighter grays and just giving ourselves more variation. Mm-hmm. And that's also what I tried to do in her hair here. So I would like you to make those edits now. I'll walk you through them so you can see what I did. And you already know everything you need to know to be able to pull this off. You've already been working with adjustment layers, levels adjustment layers, and you're already plainly very comfortable with the way you can mask them to constrain your edits. So we're going to do the same thing. Also, incidentally, the other thing that I did was I brightened her face a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
And you were making the right choice to brighten her face, you just didn't go quite far enough, and we'll see why, and you'll see what the difference is. So start by making a new levels adjustment layer. Let's start with her shirt.
Okay.
So
levels?
Yeah. Now, what do you think you need to do here to get this working?
Can I take one of these?
You could use the droppers, yeah.
The dropper, and then when I just...
It's going to be a little bit difficult to be sure that they're so small. Trying to nail the black part is going to be hard. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be easier to just work with the sliders. So start with the white end. Yeah.
Okay, so pay attention to her shirt, right?
Exactly. Just try and ignore all of this.
So I'm making it more white.
You're making it more white.
Okay.
Now, as you do that, the midpoint is shifting so that it maintains the same relative relationship to white and black that it had before. Mm-hmm. So you're also lightening up those midtones. But we want to take some of those midtones and darken them so that we're getting a broader range of black and white and middle gray. So with your white there, you're good. Now take your midtone slider and start moving it around. Try moving it to the right first. Aha. Now we're starting to get some contrast.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Now in doing that, you've darkened her shirt again, which is fine. So maybe try cranking the white a little more in. And basically you can just start massaging those two sliders until you think you see the texture that you like.
All right, that's good.
Now why don't you also bring up the black a little bit, because we don't have a strong black. Ah, there we go. Mm-hmm. Okay, now my only concern is this is now pushed so far that we've introduced a few new problems. There's this shadow's gone really, really dark.
Oh, yeah.
These shadows are looking a little unnaturally dark. So now I think actually we got to back off this a little bit.
Yeah.
Pull the white back out a little bit to reduce the contrast. Okay, and now you're going to need to pull the midpoint slider back in a little bit. That black move really turned things around. That's looking a little bit better. In fact, now I think you're maybe that's more the path. Pull the white back in.
This way?
Yeah. Okay, good. Get it brighter. And now back off the midpoint a little bit to the left. Yeah, maybe back a little bit to the right. Yeah. I'm just trying to hold those blacks. That looks pretty good.
Okay.
And we're eyeballing this a lot. We're going to do a test print. Obviously, in doing this, we've now introduced radiation burns to her, which we really don't want. So we'd like to fix all this. And I think you already know how to do that masking. You want to paint this in? Or?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So,
my recommendation would be start by filling this with black, because then all you have to do is paint her shirt. As it is now, you would have to paint everything that you don't want, and that would be a lot more painting.
okay.
So the easiest way to do that, one of the easy ways to do that, is go to Edit, Fill, and just make sure this is set to black. Okay, so now we have no adjustment at all because the mask is all filled up. So now if you grab a brush and some white paint.
And then start coloring her shirt?
Yeah. We're going to have to
Turn
fix that.
down, can we?
Well, right now, leave
it.
it, and we'll
Okay.
patch it later.
Okay.
So as you do that, you're punching a hole in the mask and letting that levels adjustment go through, and we're basically getting this really nice texture. And we're getting something that's looking a little less overly gray. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I've noticed this bug in Photoshop before. You've painted your mask and your histogram is gone here. If you just click on one of those little sliders, there we go, now it's back.
Okay.
Okay, now this is interesting. The histogram is now showing us only a histogram of the data for the area that is visible. So this bit that you've masked right here, and I know it's this shape because I can see the little silhouette of what the mask looks like. You've actually nailed it pretty well. We've clipped all this stuff, that's what that is, but for the most part you've got white set right. We've crunched the blacks a little bit. All of these blacks to the left here are going out to complete black, but I think that's okay. So you nailed your white point really well. What we need to do now is fix that. You started to go for the opacity slider, which is one way of doing that. I tend to use gray swatches
Okay.
more because I can paint over other colors of paint. Why don't you start by knocking this back by half, which would be like this dark gray right here.
This one?
The darker one on the second
right
row.
there,
Yeah.
Okay.
And now try painting over that.
Oh, okay.
So what's going on is if painting white lets the full effect go through and painting black prohibits any effect, painting gray is somewhere in between.
Yeah.
It's a lot like painting with opacity. The difference is when you paint with opacity, you can't go back over an area that you've already covered.
Oh, yeah.
You've basically overwritten that white with gray. If you wanted to choose another gray, you could paint over it. So it's an easy way to experiment. So what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely can see the lines in her shirt, which make it stand out more. So I
Yeah.
think it looks good. like
Okay.
that.
We might need a test print to be sure. You want to try and fix her hair now? It's the exact same
Yeah.
process. Okay.
So I'm going to make a new level.
Exactly. Start with the new levels adjustment. And I'd start with the white point. Now this one's rough because she's got a lot of parts of her hair, a lot of highlights that are already on the verge of overexposure. Very good. That's exactly right. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. So now get your mask in place. Another shortcut for doing that. If black is already your background color, you can just hit Command Delete. That fills the mask with the currently selected background
Okay.
color. So now you're ready to just select white and start painting. So good. Same thing. Don't worry about whether painting is blowing out highlights. You'll patch those with gray paint in the mask later. So again, for each of these areas, we're just following the histogram that's relevant to those particular areas. We want to be sure we've got, in this case, the brightest tones to be white. We're not going for the darkest tones to be black, but we are manipulating those darker tones. And we're doing that by the numbers because, as you saw, you can't really trust the screen. It looked fine on screen.
Yeah.
And don't worry about matching my print. Definitely follow what you think you like. I know you can tweak this all day long. All right, I think that looks pretty
Yeah,
good. Let's
okay.
now patch some of those overblown areas.
Okay. So would I hit more, maybe this?
Yeah, you could start in the middle.
Okay.
There we go, that's 55% gray. Painting black is going to take the effect out altogether. So a dark gray is going to put a little bit of it in. That looks good. I'd get down here, and maybe a little bit right there. Any of those white spots are just going to be eye magnets. Why don't we see a before and after? Click the eyeball on that layer. So there's no adjustment.
Oh, yeah.
And there's some. You'll want to go back later and patch this up. You spilled out over here, so that's getting lightened, but we can worry about that later. Last thing is her face, and this is a pretty simple one. Give me another levels adjustment layer. And this time you don't want to necessarily use the white point because we just want her skin tone to be a little lighter, which I think is going to be a midpoint adjustment. Drag it to the left. Now she's running the risk of going low contrast on her face, but that's better than increasing contrast and getting a lot of skin texture sometimes.
Yeah.
Maybe pull the white point in just a little bit. See, the thing is, as we pull white point in, overall contrast increases, and now that her nose is getting shinier.
Yeah.
That's why I was thinking maybe just midpoint.
Okay.
So why don't you back off of that a little bit, yeah. I think this is one where we can't tell if the adjustment is right until we get the mask in place.
Yeah.
So fill it with black and paint in her face. So in these edits, we're leaving the background completely black. I made that choice just because I knew you had gone to a lot of work to try to get the background less significant in the image, and I thought leaving it black is a way of playing it down. If you wanted to brighten it, you could. I don't think that's necessarily a bad choice. You also have to decide, do you want to brighten her neck up at all?
Maybe, yeah.
And that's tough because it is in shadow, which kind of makes her look a little more three-dimensional, which is nice.
Let's just try it.
Okay.
Oh, I don't really like that.
All right. Why don't we undo there?
Okay.
Pull the midpoint to the left a little bit. Let's get her just a little bit brighter. Oh, there we go. Now, I would just recommend one last thing, which is her face is in sunlight, and we are now saying through our edits that skin in sunlight should be this color. Then her arms are really tan.
Yeah.
So maybe try and paint a highlight just along the outside of her arm. You don't need to, I'd go with a bigger brush, actually. So we don't want to hit the inside of her arm necessarily. You could just put a little bit of shadow right where or a little bit of highlight right where the sun would be hitting. All right, if you think that's too much brightening, then go for a middle gray so that you're only painting in some of the highlight. That's working better. Okay, she looks a little sunburned maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
We can touch that up. The effect, that's what I did here. I just got a very soft one right there.
Okay.
Bigger brush, softer edge. We'll do the same thing. So this is the kind of process that you need to be going through for the final step on all of your images. Do what you did here, stack up all your layers, do all of your editing. But when it comes time to print, you want to go through and look at each of these different texture areas and see, is it really just gray or do I really have the contrast in there? And pay attention to, get a levels adjustment assigned, get a mask on it, and then pay attention to where black and white are in that mask. Also, this is not just something that you need to do for black and white shooting. It's all the same process when you're shooting color.
Yeah.
You still have tone and color that you need to worry about. I think we need to get this on paper, and we'll see if you need to do any more.
Okay.
Thanks.